Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So I'm up against the Brets again, 2000 points. It's a warm-up game ahead of the Triple Crown GT being held in Southend at the end of July. Really looking forward to it actually because they hold an event every year. It's normally been 8th edition. This is the first time they're doing Old World for their GT. They're in a bigger venue and I'm going to see loads of great guys that I normally see sort of once a year. And I'll be able to catch up with some guys that I haven't seen in a while. So that'll be a lot of fun. Practice game against the Brets. I think Brets are a great army to have a practice game with, really, because they've got lots of, flying stuff and fast-moving stuff, and that's what the Old World game is at the moment. At least that's from my experience. So if you can beat Brets, if your army can tackle a fast-moving Brets army, then you're going to be in good stead for other armies you're going to come up against in the tournament. My list is as follows. It's Waaagh the Despoiler, the Orc War Boss. He's got Great Weapon, Warball, Heavy Armor, Bedazzling Helm, and the Effigy of Morg, so he's -2 to hit. You know the drill. Rob the Orc War Boss, Ogre Blade, Talisman of Protection on a Wyvern. Can't really look past that magic item combo, can you? Adura the Orc Big Boss. He's got Cavalry Spear, Heavy Armor, Charm Shield, Glowy Green Amulet, and the Banner of Butchery on the banner. Why not? Level 4 Goblin Oddnob, he's on a Giant Wolf, he's got the Idol of Gork, and in this list I've managed to squeeze in the points for a Power Scroll and a Dispel Scroll, which comes in useful as you'll find out when I talk about the tournament in a future video. The main unit, of course, 16 Orc Boar Boy Biggins, all the upgrades, got the Cavalry Spear, the Heavy Armor, Shields, they got the Biggins, of course, and Thinking Hat on the champion, big red raggedy flag on the banner, and a musician. 4 Goblin Wolf Chariots this time, 2 Pump Wagons, and 3 Boar Chariots. And I've recently painted up my, I've kind of had the Black Orc Boar Chariot in mind when I was modelling it. I'm not going to use it as a Black Orc Boar Chariot, I'm using it as a Frenzied Orc Chariot with 3 crew members. So, yeah, not really liking the Black Orc Chariot, actually. Perhaps I'll talk about that in a future video, what my thoughts are. But anyway, no Black Orcs in this list. It's all just normal Orcs. There's 2 normal Orc War Bosses. I've got the Boar Boys in core, and I've dropped the Wolf Riders. So if you remember, if you saw my last video, I had Wolf Riders in the list to get another scoring unit, because I needed units with banners to score objectives. In this one, the missions are straight out of the rulebook. In this tournament that's coming up, the missions are straight out of the rulebook. Therefore, I don't need scoring units. I've only got 1 standard bearer in the list, other than the BSB. That's fine. All I'm trying to do is smash up the opponent's army. There is one mission where it's like Watchtower, where you need to hold the center ground where there's a tower, get your men into the tower or be within proximity of the tower. But I'm not really fussed about that. So I've dropped the Goblin Wolf Riders, and basically my whole army, as you can see in the pictures, is a big bus of Boar Boys, a War Boss on a Wyvern, and then 9 chariots. So I'm up against the Bretonnian Exiles, and it's my first time facing the Exiles list. I just think the fluff around the Exiles is really cool. Knights that have been banished from their homelands, confronting accusations of dishonour, and chosen to take the Exile's vow, rather than serve a penance that they believe unjustified for actions they do not regret. Just seems really cool, you've got these... and of course, they can't take the Duke. They can't take Grail Knights, right? So there are this sort of upper nobility of the Bretonnians are sort of incorruptible, and have chosen the chivalric course. But the Exiles have still have a sort of strong moral code, but they've been dishonoured in terms of the Bretonnian hierarchy. So we've got, from left to right then, there's 3 Peg Knights with the champion. There's a Bombard, right, so they can take artillery, a cannon, effectively, up on the hill there. You've then got the Baron, and he's the army general. He's on a Royal Pegasus, and he's got the tasty combo of the Gauntlet of the Duel, so no refusal on the challenges, the Virtue of Confidence, so you can reroll hits in a challenge, and he's got this Frontier Axe, which is, I just had to look it up from the Arcane Journal there, +2 strength, AP -3, multi-wound 2. It's a double-handed weapon, so he's striking last, but damn, that is a pretty tasty axe. You've then got the unit of 8 Knights of the Realm there, sort of in a bus in the middle. They've got 3 characters in there, so there's level 3 wizard who's a exile wizard. Can't remember the name of it. Maybe I got that right. Exile wizard on demonology, so they can take other laws in the exile list. And she rolled up demonic vigor, demonic vessel, and summoning the magic missile. Then there's a level 2 damsel on battle magic. She's got Oaken Shield and the Lady's Gift from the Forces of Fantasy book. Paladin BSB with the Horn, obviously. Moving on, then you've got a big unit of 36 Yeoman Guard, and that's another new unit from the Arcane Journal, with spears, light armor, shield, and then one of those characters there, I forget what it's called, a monk, is it? With a triptych or something like that. 5 Yeoman, another 3 Peg Knights with a champion, and then another Bombard in the corner. And then last but not least, of course, there is the Green Knight. Now we're playing, if you can just have a look at the battlefield here, the 2 hills as the natural terrain pieces that the Green Knight can emerge from. In this edition, have you seen the rules for the Green Knight? Check him out. I mean, he's just pretty phenomenal. He's got an extra wounds. He's on 4 wounds. Basically, because he turns up in the command phase, in the strategy phase, he can charge as soon as he rocks up. So, pretty deadly. He doesn't have Swift Stride, so he's lost that. And he's still got, of course, the Unbreakable, Unstable combination. So you can pop him on the combat res. But he comes back to life. He's a lord. He's got a tasty blade that he can go higher strength or more attacks. And yeah, he's a problem. And the only things I have with magic weapons that can really do damage to him is my war boss on the Wyvern with the Ogre Blade. Nothing else actually has a magic weapon. Of course, my big bus of boar boys could get a charge on him and then maybe pop him on the combat res. But it's still a big risk, because if he does enough wounds, that won't work. And what can I do? So I've gone for a corner deployment in this battle line scenario, as you can see in the pictures, right? I've gone just all on the left-hand side there. I've got lots of drops with this army because I've got lots of individual units, right? So I normally can sort of wait to see where my opponent puts his stuff down before making a decision on where to put my big bus of boar boys, right? I'd left a gap purposefully in the middle, but I've gone on that left-hand side. Really, I'm just thinking about this Green Knight, okay? He's got to show up now, either in that hill on my deployment zone or the hill in my opponent's deployment zone, and I'd rather have him coming on in front of me than coming on to the side of me. If he is going to come onto the side of me now, he won't be able to charge anything when he appears, because of course he can just turn up and charge, which is crazy. I've got 1 pump wagon then on that hill, which, he can choose to just kill the pump wagon if he wants, or if he wants to just run towards my army, he will at least have to make a march test, because that pump wagon will be there on the hill when he arrives. So with that in mind, I've also got 1 Goblin chariot on the far right there, facing down that Bombard, just to give that Bombard something to think about. So after 3 rerolls, the Brets get first turn, which is so unusual in my game, because I play Drew quite a bit, and it's always obviously him kneeling down to pray and I'm getting first turn. So these exiles, if you don't know, they don't have the blessing. Okay, so they don't get the ward save. They do instead get the stubborn and veteran rules, which is a great combination, especially for Brets, because they're usually a bit risky when they get charged, because they might just get broken and flee. But now if they're all stubborn, they can take the charge and they can come in with counter charges. And veteran is a great rule in this game, if you don't know already. Just being able to re-roll any leadership test. There are plenty of leadership tests which come up, not least the restrain and pursue, which can be very annoying when you fail it and you have to pursue off in a direction you don't want to go in. But despite this veteran re-roll, on the first turn he fails to blow the horn. So my Wyvern retains his fly special rule for my turn. Turns out the BSB has the horn. I was expecting it to perhaps be on the Baron, but so I've got to hunt down that BSB at some point in order to get my Wyvern flying into this game, but he can at least fly on turn 1. The wizards, who are both in this bus of knights, get off 2 enchantments each, right? So they're pumped up now with the demonic vessel, the demonic vigor, the ward save, and the regen save, right? So that unit is pretty buffed up. But the Bretonnian army only takes sort of small movements forward, wary of the speed of the Orcs that they're up against. Peg Knights and the Baron remain on the hill, and the level 3 moves into the infantry unit. So it is no longer with the knights there. The Green Knight shows up and charges the pump wagon. Okay, bye bye pump wagon. Then they move on to the shooting phase. Now, both cannons roll a misfire and then a 1, and they both blow up turn 1, which is just, how unlucky can you be turn 1? I mean, I play for 8th edition. I play dwarves where I often have cannons, and I also play Demons of Khorne where I have these 2 skull cannons, right? And that has happened to me once before, so I can say I do have an experience with this where I've had 2 skull cannons both blowing up on turn 1. But yeah, I mean that sucks, man. Especially as he has an opportunity. I did deploy my Wyvern out of sight of one of the cannons, but he had an opportunity to knock a couple of wounds off the Wyvern on turn 1, and then maybe on turn 2 have a go at crippling that Wyvern. But them both blowing up on turn 1, man, ouch. So my Goblin Oddnob rolls up the Evil Sun Shining enchantment, the Bad Moon Hex, the Itchy Nuisance Hex, and the Vindictive Glare Magic Missile, which is a tasty one. We surge forward with everything on our first turn, not afraid of getting within charge distance with the boars, because of course I've got counter charge. So those Peg Knights on the hill, the Baron on the hill, I really just want to rush that hill as quickly as possible. The Green Knight's already turned up, but he's kind of out of range of doing anything, at least for this turn. So I'm not sort of hunting him down with my Wyvern just yet. He will, if I do that anyway, he'll just run out of charge arc of my Wyvern. So the Wyvern is following up with the boars, as you can see in the picture. And really, we're just going for the point straight away. Now, my ball boys I countercharge. My chariots don't, of course. So I don't want those knights coming up and charging my chariots and avoiding my main unit. Okay, so I put one chariot right in front of those knights. So if they do want to charge, they've got to come towards my boars, and that's of course what I want. In the shooting phase, I get off the Vindictive Glare on the Baron. So obviously I've moved up my my Goblin behind my boars, and of course I've got this Idol of Gork, which extends the range of the magic missile to 21 inches, and he's just within range. I can see him on top of the hill there, and boom, I get off the Strength 7 hit, and I roll a 3 for the wound, so that his general is down to 1 wound straight away, which just really cripples him. And I really can't complain about Brett's turn 1 or Orc's turn 1. It's kind of going in my way to begin with. So the Bretts have to make something happen on turn 2. The horn goes off, so my Wyvern cannot fly on my turn 2. The Knights, of course, are still buffed up with this ward save and this regen from the Oaken Shield and the Lady's Vow. They charge the chariot in front of them. The Baron charges into my boars. Now, he's only on 1 wound, and obviously I don't know what magic items he has at this stage, which seems a little bit suicidal, especially as those Pagan Knights are not going in. It's just the Baron by himself, so I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's got a trick up his sleeve, but we'll see. I countercharge with my boars, and let's make that happen. What else happens? Yes, he gets off the summoning and takes some wounds off the Goblin Chariot, because obviously his level 3 has moved out of that unit, which is charging in. Now I can see why he's done that. There's not much movement elsewhere, but obviously you can see the Yeoman and the Peg Knights moving up on the right-hand side. The Green Knight comes into play now. He can't charge anything on this turn, but he's moving up, as you can see in the pictures. And then we move on to combat, right? So his general charges in, and our generals meet in a challenge. So, I accept the challenge. He's got to declare a challenge because he's got this virtue, right, where he's re-rolling hits in the challenge, and I have to accept. But I'm happy to do that because I've also got a combination of magic items which works well in the challenge, right? I've got -2 to hit. Now he's got re-rolls to hit, so he needs 6s to hit with a re-roll. On his initial throw of the dice, he gets no 6s. He picks them up for the re-roll and gets 2 6s, one of which wounds, and he's got multi-wounds too, right? So my general is left on 1 wound, but that's all he needs to strike back. And of course, he's got a great weapon, and so he smashes up the general, and that's the end of him. And it turns out, obviously, he had 1 wound going in, but my general actually got 4 wounds in that challenge, so he would have just killed him anyway. And that's the problem with an Orc War Boss charging in with a great weapon. He's got 5 attacks and at strength 7, you know, and AP -4 with the evil sun shining behind him. So yeah, you want to be Orc War Bosses have a lot of output on the charge, and yeah, bye bye Baron. So it's Orc's turn 2, and I've got some charges to make and some impetuous tests to make. But not before I get off some enchantments and hexes, right? So I'm getting off the Evil Sun Shining again. I actually get that spell off every turn this game, sometimes using my reroll from the Idol of Gork. Such a fantastic spell. I get the double hex off on those Paganites on the left, right? So I've got the Itchy Nuisance and the Bad Moon, and they basically go down to Toughness 1 and Initiative 1. Now, they're out of arc of my Wyvern, but I've got one Goblin Chariot that can see them. And if they're down to Toughness 1, then and Initiative 1, then that Goblin Chariot has a good chance of doing some damage and potentially even winning combat. If he's still alive, of course, after they strike back. So the Goblin Chariot is going in. My boars are going in against the knights. One of my Orc chariots is going in against the knights, and one of my Goblin chariots, who fails his impetuous test, chooses to charge in at those yeoman guard. Now, the knights flee, and they flee through the yeoman guard back towards the sort of top right corner there, towards the Brett's board edge, which I think was the right move, because getting the double charge there with the knights and the chariot would have been pretty devastating on those guys, even if they did countercharge. We then play it wrong here, because as the boars cannot redirect their charge, they should pursue the full distance of the charge. Whereas we did it, well, I guess we both still got 8th edition on the brain, right? So we did it as if they failed the charge and then only move forward the highest dice roll. So it's the same with the Orc Chariot, but they actually should have moved forward quite a lot towards those Yeoman Guard, which, perhaps would have had a difference on the game if those Yeoman Guard were to react in an aggressive way. I don't know how they would have reacted to having those ball boys very close to them within charge distance. But by the time we realised it, we'd already done a whole other turn and a half, and it was kind of too late to go back and change things. However, the Goblin Wolf Chariots both make it in, right? So the one Goblin Wolf Chariot which makes it into those Peg Knights, and yeah, because they've been hexed, the Wolf Chariot does 2 wounds, takes 2 wounds back, but ends up drawing the combat. And the Wolf Chariot on the right makes it all the way into those Yeoman Guard, only kills one of them on the impact, but then the Goblins and the Wolves are in base to base with this level 3 wizard, and they manage to kill her. Which is just sort of fantastic result from me out of nowhere. I mean, the Goblin Chariot just failed an impetuous test. I wasn't even going to declare that charge, but then I'm just getting in there and taking out that wizard. So just a fantastic result on Orc's turn 2. So things really sort of going my way so far in the first couple of turns. The Baron, of course, going down to 1 wound and then dying on the following turn. My general is now on 1 wound, so perhaps he's an assassination target for the Bretts as we move into turn 3. So Brett's turn 3. Now the pegs on the right charge the boar chariot in the centre, who flees. They then redirect into the Goblin Chariot in the bottom right hand corner, who also flees. So those pegs are off chasing that Goblin Chariot into the corner, which suits me fine. The Orc Chariot is likely to rally because he's near the general, but the Goblin Chariot in that corner is very unlikely to rally, but it is what it is. So I forgot to mention last turn, my other Orc Chariot just positioned itself in front of that Green Knight. Obviously the Green Knight is a lone model and can just go round that Orc Chariot if he wants, but at least it stops the Green Knight charging into my general, who's just on 1 wound at the corner of that unit. And so the Green Knight chooses to now charge my boar chariot, and perhaps that's a good role for the Green Knight because he's on his own and he can go around picking off these chariots one by one. He ends up doing 2 wounds on the boar chariot, and the chariot gives ground. The Knights of the Realm rally, and they go into lance formation, as you can see in the picture. Of course, he was fleeing during the strategy phase, so he didn't get to get off the horn, so my Wyvern gets to fly on its turn. Yay! The Peg Knights, of course, in combat with the boar chariot on the left, fluff their attacks. They lose combat by 1. They fall back in good order. Embarrassingly, though, my chariot doesn't actually get to catch them. and is sort of there, sort of pursuing them. But I do get the charge on my turn, so perhaps that chariot is going in again on my turn. And what else? Yeah, the Yeoman Guard just sort of turn to face, but they're not keen to sort of come any closer to my ball boys. Those mounted yeomen as well, positioning themselves at a fair distance away from my ball boys. So Orcs turn 3, and nothing much happens on this turn. I managed to debuff the pegs again on the left-hand side with the hexes, in my mind thinking, well, if I get the Itchy Nuisance and the Bad Moon on those pegs again, I can just charge in with the Wolf Chariot. I don't need to put any other units committed to killing those last 2 peg knights. However, my Wyvern fails the Impetuous test, so it is what it is. My Wyvern's going in, and those peg knights really are dead now. The boars move up, but we stay out of charge range of the infantry, because obviously I can't countercharge those infantry. If they're charging me, then I get caught out, and then I can't countercharge the knights. So I'd stay out of charge range of the infantry, but moving up, I'm not really scared of any of those units. But with everything all together, they do have a chance of doing a lot of damage, especially if the Green Knight gets in as well. And as you can see, we're left facing each other, left, right, across the board now, with sort of my armies just destroyed everything on the left side. The Brets have moved up into the open spaces on their left side, my right side. And this Green Knight, I've got to catch him with my Wyvern. Not sure how I'm going to do that somehow. But otherwise, he's just going to go around mopping up on my small units. He finishes off the chariot he's in combat with, restrains pursuit, and now he's ready to charge again on Brett's turn 4. So it's the beginning of turn 4, and I think the Orcs are just about up on points at this stage. So the Bretts have lost the Baron on the Royal Peg, they've lost a unit of pegs, they've lost the level 3, and they've lost the cannons. Now I've lost 6 chariots at this point, but the thing is the chariots aren't really worth many points. The Snotling Pump Wagon's almost nothing, the Wolf Chariot's like 50 odd points. I've lost 1 Boar Chariot, but it's only 1, and I might lose another, I suppose, to the Green Knight very soon, but I think the Orcs are just about up on points at the moment. My General, though, he's looking very exposed on the right side of that unit. He's only on 1 wound. I am kind of expecting that Green Knight to go in and try and assassinate him, but I think at the end of the day, Drew just thought perhaps it's a bit risky. Needs 6s to hit my General, and if he goes for the extra attacks, he might not wound him at toughness 5. If he goes for the extra strength, he might not have as many attacks. He might just not roll a 6 to hit, right? So it's a little bit risky, because if he fluffs the attacks, I've got the static combat res, and then the Green Knight pops, right? So I've got the banner, BSB, a rank, close order, and I've got the big red raggedy flag. So I've got a static combat res of 5 on that unit. So he does have a flank with the Green Knight, but he's only got 4 wounds, so he needs a wound in order to stay alive, right? So either he goes there, he doesn't get the wound, he pops on the combat res, or perhaps he does get 1 wound, kills my General, and then he sticks and he's alive. So it's a bit of a gamble there. I think he goes for the safe option in the end. I think had I been him at that point, I might have thought, okay, well, let's just gamble, let's just go for it, because what else are you going to do? If you're down on points, you've got to make something happen. But then perhaps he's thinking, well, Green Knight has a good opportunity to mop up some points from these remaining chariots, whereas if I just throw him in there and he pops, then I'm back to square one. So I can sort of see the reasoning on both sides. The horn goes off again, because we're obviously the knights have rallied. Still think that horn's overpowered, man. It should at least have a range on it. I mean, my Wyvern, all the way on the other side of the table there, hears this horn go off, and now he can't fly. So the Green Knight charges that next board chariot who had rallied last turn, holds from that charge, bring it on. Okay, what's up? The Peg Knights leave that fleeing chariot at the bottom there, who rallied miraculously. No, sorry, that chariot didn't rally. So mistake there. Sorry, that chariot fled the board. It was my Orc chariot that rallied. So those Peg Knights come in, and they're sort of forming a sort of semicircular battle line here, with the Yeomen and the Knights in lance formation, and the other Yeoman Guard waiting for my boars to sort of get out of position so they can do a multi-charge on me. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm not sure how that's going to go. I mean, I actually want to get into combat with my boars. They're not impetuous, so I don't have to charge in. But obviously, I don't just want to charge that big infantry block and then have the knights charge me in the flank. I want to charge the knights, or countercharge the knights at least. So it's a bit tense here on turn 4. There's another 2 turns, and it's a bit of a standoff. The Green Knight does kill that Orc board chariot, and we're on to Orcs turn 4. So it's Orcs turn 4, and it's quite a quick one for me because there isn't a lot to do. I don't charge in with the boars. They've got the thinking hat. They're not impetuous. I instead do a big wheel to face the the peg knights and the other knights, bringing those yeomen into charge range, so inviting the charge from them. And the reason I've done this is because my mage there has managed to get off the hex on those guys to drop their toughness and drop their initiative, right? Which means if they charge me, they're going to be charging in with toughness 2 and initiative 1, right? So that means that I'm still going to be able to attack them and do loads of damage, as if I had charged them basically, because they their toughness drops, so I don't need my strength buffs to win them on 2s. So that's going to be interesting to see what decision they make. My pump wagon moves up. My wyvern moves up with an 8-inch march. It's annoying how the wyvern's only movement 4 without flying. Dragons are move 6. Snotlings are movement 5. Yeah, and so my wyvern's only movement 4. What is that about? But yeah, not much I can do. On to turn 5. So it's a tense last few turns to the game here, as we're both trying to see if any of our units are going to move out of position. The yeomen move up to chaff my boar boy unit right in their face. The Green Knight goes into the pump wagon in front of it. And those peg knights sort of move further round. So, if my boar boys were to, fail their restraint check after killing that yeoman, perhaps they'll be able to get off into a flank. However, there's a little twist in the tale as the Green Knight destroys the pump wagon and then fails its restraint check on a leadership 9. And then the Green Knight sort of goes charging off past my, sort of through the gap there by my Orc chariot and that tower, and is now within sight of my wyvern, who cannot fly, but still is in charge distance of the Green Knight. So I think I'm going to give that a go on my turn, and that's exactly what happens. So in Orcs turn 5, the wyvern charges the Green Knight, who has to hold. My chariot charges those peg knights just about in range of them. They choose to flee, probably quite sensibly, even though there's a good chance I'd fail that charge, but probably quite sensible. The frenzied chariot has to redirect and then goes into the flank of those yeomen. The balls go into the yeomen as well and destroy them. The Green Knight loses combat with the wyvern, left on 1 wound. Probably better for me that he's left on 1 wound instead of dying, to be honest, because now he can't just sort of respawn in turn 6 and charge something new. Even though it's a 4-up, he might not respawn, but still, I know now I can just sort of kill him on turn 6, and that's that. So we move on to turn 6. So the charge from the Knights of the Realm does not materialise, and we are left sort of in a sort of stalemate in turn 6 there, as there's just some sort of minor repositioning and the death of the Green Knight. And that's all that happens really. Now, on my turn 6, I go for a last charge into this yeoman block just to see if it's possible to break and destroy that whole block with 1 charge from the boar boys. I don't manage to do it. It got very, very down to the wire because I managed to kill swathes of them and reduce them down to unit strength 16. But they kill one of my boar boys, or 1 or 2 of my boar boys in return, and I'm on unit strength 32. So I've got double their unit strength, but not quite more than double their unit strength. So they don't break in the end. But that was just, I suppose, just for fun on the last turn to see if I could break that block. So yeah, nice little win for the Orcs there. Pleased with my list so far ahead of this tournament that's coming up. I have already submitted the list, which is, as I said, a little bit more refined from my last list. I've got quite a few games under my belt now with the Nomadic Waaagh. And really just liking the way that I've just got two main big units really. So I've got a big unit of all boys and I've got the Wyvern. And that's where all the points are. I've got a bunch of chariots, but I'm not really bothered about losing them because as long as I can get to grips with the main enemy units, I could lose a bunch of chariots and still not give away that many points. But yeah, some bad luck from the Brets here. I mean, obviously losing the two cannons on turn 1 sucks. I got one Goblin chariot into that Yeoman Guard and took out that Wizard on turn 2, was it? Very effective, long bomb charge, got in there, and the Goblins skewer this Wizard, which was just great. I mean, the magic was really effective for me this game as well, especially those debuffs. And I find, if you drop their toughness, right, that introduces a fantastic spell because it lasts up until their turn as well. You can drop their toughness. That can deter them from charging on their turn, and once you drop their toughness and drop their initiative, that can make a charge from a lonely Goblin Wolf chariot seem a bit scary, because I'm coming in with strength 4, strength 3 attacks, and if you're tough and I'm wounding you on 2s with goblins or something like that, that can be a bit scary. So that dropping those toughness and initiative of those Peg Knights made a Goblin chariot go in and see them off. So yeah, really liking the combination of the Waaagh magic with this list. Brett's Exiles are really good. Obviously, Drew had some bad luck in this game, but I think the combination of the Veteran and the Stubborn rule, that combination he had on his Baron as well, with the re-rolling hits in the charge and that dirty weapon with the multi-wounds too, because he's stubborn as well, right? So he can call a challenge. You have to accept it with the Gauntlet of the Duel. He can re-roll hits in that challenge. He's doing multi-wounds too. He's got -3 AP. And then, even if he loses on the combat res, he just bumps back a couple of inches, or he falls back or whatever, and then he can declare another challenge next time around. And assuming you don't, if you're losing characters, you're maybe losing your magic item buffs or your BSB or whatever, and he's challenging them out and killing them, and so he could just send in one character into a unit and be able to survive quite effectively. Interesting choice on the demonology. I'm not totally convinced with the demonology. I think it's good for chaos because you have a chaos sorcerer that kind of buffs himself and he becomes quite fighty. On the first turn, it was pretty scary as he got off the ward save and the regen save, and he got off the demonic vessel and the demonic vigor, and that unit was looking pretty tanky. But then again, obviously we didn't get to see how the demonology played out. But yeah, the Exiles look pretty good. The big block of infantry I think would be good against many other armies because I've got a big Death Star. That big block, it's just not big enough because I've got a massive big unit myself. But assuming your opponent doesn't have a big sort of Death Star unit, that block of infantry can be very good as well because obviously you can't shift them quickly. They're not going anywhere. I think they've got the shield wall rule as well, right? So they've got a good armor save when you charge them. And that's what Bretts need, really. They need things that you bounce off, or things that are stubborn, things that don't shift, and then they can countercharge you with all these knights. But yeah, another good game against the Bretts. Feeling really prepared for this Triple Crown tournament. And yeah, maybe I'll do a quick tournament wrap-up of that when I get around to it. If you watch this far, guys, as usual, smash that like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.